Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast presented by Greatest Ultimate Bag. I'm Jen Hilton and I have the pleasure of welcoming Antoine Davis to the podcast and welcoming back Elliott Chartock to the show. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Dan, doing well.
Doing well.
Well, of course, yesterday on the IG Live announcement with Antoine Davis, he is the newest member of the New York Empire, and Elliott has been on the podcast before, so we're going to get to know Antoine a bit better and hopefully get to know Elliott a little bit more too. But the reason these two are on together is we're going to talk about it. They were former San Francisco FlameThrowers in the past together. But before that, Antoine, we're going to start with you. You answered on the IG Live yesterday. Aside from Elliott, who obviously we brought on the show here, which of your new teammates have you met or played with before?
Well, I played with Elliott in 2018, on San Francisco FlameThrowers, rest in peace, and that's the only teammates I played with.
Have you in Ultimate interacted with any of your teammates before? Even, I mean, we're talking on the other side of it, as other than, I guess, the time with the Atlanta Hustle, of course. But is there any rivalries that you're going to have to settle in practice or anything like that?
I don't think there's any rivalries on the team. I've definitely butted heads with a few of them, just because there's many great players and we always match up against each other, and those matchups are pretty intense. Me and Jack Williams had several good dances with each other on the club and pro stage. So looking to that matchup at practice.
All right. And then Elliott, speaking of Antoine, who, again, you're the one who has seen him up close and personal in practice. What part of his game are you most excited to be added to the Empire from a season ago?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I think two things, on field, obviously, as a thrower, the speed, and the aerial threat is a pretty obvious one. I've got some flashbacks to being in San Francisco and just throwing it when Twan was a few steps behind his defender, and then he just would catch it in stride, with his defender about 10 yards behind. But past that, I think the off-field presence, I'm really excited for, just adding someone to the team who's like a really good person, works really hard. I think that work ethic is something that I had through him back in 2018. He was sending me some track workouts that I'd be doing, and just to have that work ethic, and then someone who's just a lot of fun to hang with at practice and outside of practice, I'm really looking forward to again.
Yeah, well, we're going to go back to the 2017 version of that San Francisco team, Antoine, before Elliott joined the team. So again, we do pour one out for the San Francisco FlameThrowers here, champions of the AUDL in 2017. So Antoine, you played on that team with the likes of Bo Kittredge, former Empire player, Cassidy Rasmussen, Marcelo Sanchez, Joel Slatchett. I'm going to miss somebody. Eli Kearns, Ashlyn Joy. We're talking heavy hitters in the Ultimate world, especially on the West Coast. How do you think the experience of playing with so many big names on that team is going to help you play with, what is a star-studded Empire team that's going to have a target on their back just because all the big names?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I actually haven't realized that until now, how similar those comparisons are. It's really I think going to be a dance of egos, and us all buying into that we are a team and we should all play roles and allow other people to use their strengths while we don't have to do everything. Obviously, when someone has a hot hand, we should let them ball out and then have a great game. But we realize this is a team sport, and we're going to win a championship if we all play our roles.
Yeah, well, speaking of a championship, en route to that 2017 title, what do you think you learned then, again, with the FlameThrowers, that are going to be applicable to helping the Empire win their second title?
Applicable. I think, it's kind of the same sentiment, just be willing to divide up the load and realize that you don't have to do it all by yourself, because we have 10 players that have throughout their career have carried the load of their team and realize we don't have to do that, and we can pass off that load to others, and we'll have great success when we do.
Yeah, and Elliott, speaking of different roles, last year against Atlanta in the playoffs at Granite Knolls, just a fantastic game, ends with Ryan Oscar at the buzzer there. You switched over to the D-line for that game. Is that versatility something that we could see more from you this season?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely like defense, and it's just really wherever the team needs me, and whether it's on the O line distributing to our cutters, or on the D line trying to grind and then put it in for a break. I'm definitely happy wherever the team needs me.
Well, as far as where the team needed you last year, you were fourth on the team with total yards with 6,255. You topped the team with 4,890 throwing yards, more than 800 more yards than Jack Williams in second. How do you think your role changed over the course of the year, though, especially as we remember that O-line who had a few injuries, including yourself dealing with a few nagging injuries as well throughout the season?
Yeah, I think well, just to add a little context, I against Boston in the last game of the season had hurt my shoulder in a layout, and was kind of trying to power through it, and I think in the first quarter had maybe had 2 or 3 turns, and just kind of pulled myself at that point. I think the coach Charlie and I were talking closely about whether or not it was a good idea, and I think we both knew it wasn't a good idea to continue on, and definitely dug a bit of a hole for the team, but was amazed at the performance Oscar, everyone, Babbitt, Jack, Ben put in. So yeah, sorry about that one, Antoine, but very happy about that comeback win. But I think, given that going into a few of the most important games in the season, it was a little painful to throw. I think just swallowing my pride and going out there and playing D-line. And I think now coming in this year, I don't know if I'll be O or D-line, but I actually think I'd have a lot of pride potentially in being D-line, and really fighting to give the O-line big margins. So wherever they need me.
Yeah, I have to admit, being on the sideline for that game, on the opposite sideline, Elliott, there was one, I think it was obviously against Atlanta zone. You wound up throwing a hammer directly into the ground from about 6 feet away. And yeah. I remember saying out loud, and the mic, thankfully, I turned it off by that point, but I said, Elliott doesn't look right. That's not something that just, Elliott doesn't do that. This doesn't happen. So certainly, yeah, I mean, unfortunately injured for that game, but fortunately, the Empire, as you said, were able to come back in that one against a star-studded Atlanta team as well. And speaking of Atlanta, where Antoine, you spent last season, your regular season averages for the last 4 years. Now we're talking the 2 flamethrower seasons, San Jose and Atlanta, averaging 25 assists, 32 goals, 12 blocks, including the playoffs in 2011, finishing second on Atlanta with 4,206 total yards in 12 games. And this is actually for both of you too. How do you think the game is continuing to change in terms of the metrics we're seeing, just major yardage from individual players? I mean, of course, the team numbers are going up, but whether it's Boston as a team or Ben Yacht, Antoine Davis, just huge numbers that we're seeing of total yards throwing and receiving from different players. And Antoine, for you in particular, how are you going to sustain that this season with the Empire?
I think that's I'm going to blow that out of the water, especially with the throwers we have on our team. I think Atlanta, we did have great throwers, but they were mainly our big throws came from 3 or 4 people. And with Empire, I see about 8 throwers on our team that can get me the disc in a lot of different positions. So I only see that number going up.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think knowing Atlanta, I think a lot of the big throws are their handlers. But when I look at the Empire, I think I'm a handler, obviously, but then I can probably name 3 or 4 cutters that have better throws than I do. So I think adding the cutter to cutter connection also is, something that's going to open up your game and the game of the whole team.
Well, yeah, both Oscar ranked, was it 7th or 8th or 9th in huck percentage. So many of your huck initiations were even coming from the initiating cutters, whether it was Jack or Oscar. Yeah. Okay. And then going back to Anton, we're going to go farther back. I said this is the last 4 years, but we're going all the way back. DC 2015, then San Fran 2017-18, San Jose 2019, Atlanta 2021. How do you think the league has changed in the 7 years you've been around? Because yeah, believe it or not, you've been around a little longer than people think you have, I think.
Yeah, 2015 was kind of a surprise that I was playing pro, but
yeah, just that time, a small sample size, and the DC Breeze were on the up at that time, but they're certainly a powerhouse now.
Yeah, I think people were still getting comfortable with the idea of professional ultimate, and so it was still what is this kind of game? What are we doing out here, kind of thing. And then as the professionalism grew, through the FlameThrowers and the San Jose and now Atlanta and Empire, it just, the standards have risen to a level that I can't believe that I'm able to participate in. And from the crowd experience to the on-field play to just like the level of standard of play has just risen dramatically. I'm honestly just lucky to be here and to experience it all.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of credit goes to especially the ultimate minds, the coaches, just continuing to make things more and more complicated for especially O-lines, and particularly your former coach and Miranda Knowles. And Elliott, on that point, in this offseason, as you're getting time to kind of think about the different things you saw last year. Again, you're not going to have to, fortunately, I think it's fortunate the Empire won't have to play Atlanta until potentially the playoffs. But yeah, Elliott, as you're thinking about last season and some of the new looks you saw, some of the different things that coaches are now doing, what are you doing in this time off just to figure out how to break down what Atlanta might have? I mean, this is, we'll say from Miranda Knowles, this is part one of what is always going to be evolving as other teams are changing their personnel too.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think obviously the season didn't end how we were hoping it would, and through that, I think I've just taken this off season. It's a little bit of a fire, and just tried to really like focus on my fitness and getting it back to a place that even last year, it never was quite where I wanted it to be. And so in this off season, working the gym, injury prevention, and pretty soon, a lot more outside stuff, running, trying to get my fitness back. I think I've more, with the encouragement of a few of the other players, we've stayed in touch and shared workouts and motivated each other, but really focused on kind of the individual fitness rather than the team strategy. And I'm actually not in New York right now. I get back in a few weeks. And once the whole team's together and we're practicing, hanging out, weekly, I think that's maybe where we'll start more to focus on strategy and think about some of our opponents.
Yeah. And so following up on that, I mean, this is for both of you. As far as the direction the league has gone, and I've asked the other 4 players who've already signed with the Empire too, this question, I want to hear your opinion as well. As far as where the league could be going, do you think we're going to see even a higher percentage of vertical looks, hucks, and deep throws than we have in the past? Or do you think that the likes of Raleigh and DC, do you think, especially Elliott, for you as a handler, do you think we're going to see even more handler weaves, even more handler sets? And if anything, string plays might be coming more on unders, and it might be just longer progressions of string plays, not just a deep look to yacht on the second throw as being the initiating string play, that we might see this 12 to 15, an orchestra, a beautiful symphony of throws and catches.
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a really good question. I think, the game's getting more and more athletic each year. And I think tactically things are progressing as well. I think there's a ton of room for the sport to grow tactically yet. I think if you look at like when I played baseball back in the day, we had all these, different hand motions so you could communicate to the third base coach and to the catcher, et cetera. I think there are different ways potentially that on-field teams might be able to communicate without the other team knowing, but where you have like perfect understanding of what you want your cutter to do, what's going to happen next. So kind of on-field codes or patterns. And I think as well in game plans, there's a ton for the sport to grow as far as, playbooks and strategies. So I don't know, it'd be fun to be part of that this year. If we start to really develop and I don't know, make some kind of larger team strategy on and off the field. And yeah, as for small ball versus big ball, it's really hard to say. I think it's not, like every team will have fit into one mold. I think each team is going to have to find what works for them. So I know the small ball works very well for Raleigh. I think they also have players who have played together for a decade, and we just have, a different formula that might, allow us to win it this year. And so maybe it does end up being small ball. Maybe it's more hucks. Maybe it's something else. But yeah, we'll have to see.
So is that the second time we've had to shout out the Palmetto Sand Gnats on the Empire podcast, Elliott?
Yeah, you got 2 for 2. Yeah, let's keep it running.
South Carolina high school baseball. Here we go.
Exactly.
Yeah, Antoine, I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, I think you have a reputation around the league, deservedly so, as being very athletic, but there's so many other dynamic parts of your game. Again, would you feel comfortable even with as we said, like a lot of the small ball and going in that direction? Or do you think the Empire should lean into the fact that they have some of the best athletes in the entire league?
Yeah, I definitely think we should be relying on leaning on our strengths and, mitigating our, avoid, situations where we have to count on our weaknesses as much as possible. And yeah, we have like 5 giants on our team. Why not use that? And that's pretty intimidating for any opponent to match up against. And just to piggyback off what Elliot was saying, like when I was playing football and basketball, we usually have binders of playbooks worth of strategies, plays, calls, and I was in middle school and high school when that happened.
Mhm.
And so like I think very much so. Ultimate is like in a like checkers levels worth of strategy, right? There's probably like 4 different offenses that mainly people use, and 4 different defenses people use. So like, we're still trying to view the field in creative ways and come up with new ideas and try different things. And also kind of like as more and more people become more dedicated to the sport, the chemistry is going to grow immensely. We've seen that in Raleigh with the small ball. Like they just know where that person is, like several seconds before they actually make the move, which creates a game that's hard to beat, right? So as the like offense begins to rise, so does the defense, and it's just a game of like cat and mouse at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally true. I think that the game is going to continue to evolve as I think you're going to get to a point where teams are going to be able to have so many different sets and so many different offensive looks. And you're right, chemistry and playing together, that seems to matter more than anything else. So, Elliot, back to you on this point about, again, the way the game is evolving and the information we have at our disposal. You've been known to be a numbers guy in the past. So I want to ask, what stats do we not have yet that you'd want to see moving forward or that you think would be useful to you?
Yeah, really good question. Before I jump into that, Antoine, I like that you're already saying we to talk about the Empire. So yeah, that's a good sign. That made me happy. Yeah, it's funny. I think from like from a sports fan point of view, I really love stats like, sabermetrics, all of that kind of stuff. Moneyball, one of my favorite books, and also a fantastic movie, and just like, going to games, baseball games when I was a kid, and looking at their average, and when they, get a hit or not, try and recalculate their new average. And even like sabermetrics and basketball stats, they've gotten so much more advanced. I think as a player, though, I have such a different relationship with stats. In that, like, I think the more aware of stats you are, it can actually, it can actually start to hurt your game potentially, or at least for me. And it's something that like Ryan Osgar and I particularly have talked about a lot over the off season, how the more we're just like focused on ourselves and focus on the game, and at the end of the day, like winning the game with the team, that's kind of much more important than like any individual stat, and that can, potentially be a distraction. So I'm going to maybe take an easy way out and say, from a player's point of view, like I'm more focused on being less focused on the stats. And maybe if I ever come back as like a coach or a GM or something, we can talk again, and I'll tell you which stats I need to assess, which players are going to fit into the 20-man roster. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't sell yourself short. You come back as an analyst here on the podcast, or on. I got different content to put you to work, Elliot. Don't worry.
Okay.
In your post-playing day. So we're gonna head off the field though. Now for the rest of this show, Antoine, I got 2 more questions for you, and then we got a really exciting lightning round ahead. So, Antoine, in your non-ultimate time, you run a business and you model. Are there any applicable skills in ultimate for those ultimate players that might want to try their hand in modeling or entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for at least for modeling, it's a lot of like all eyes are on you, right? When I'm at a photo shoot or a commercial shoot, like there's like 20 people looking at me, and you have to like act, look, relax, and kind of create the art that you're trying to portray in that given setting. And what that helped me especially is like self-management, and like just being okay is like, hey, the spot, like literally the spotlight is on you. And like it's okay to be here, like you're being put in this position because of your talent and of the work you put in, and and it's now to display it. And with entrepreneurship, there's I'm a mind to success life coach, and with that, there's also a lot of self-management as well. But mainly with that, it's more like dealing with the many hats you have to wear, and that really applies to the athletic portion of my life, because there's several different avenues you can go down as a player to improve yourself. So it's Elliot was talking about, there's the fitness portion, there's the nutrition portion, there's the sleep, there's how you're communicating to your teammates, how are you taking feedback, how are you your self-talk, your presence on the field, are you even a joy to be around, stuff like that. There's so many different facets that that are important that you may be unaware of, that you need to make yourself aware of so you can improve upon them.
All right. And then before we hit the lightning round, Antoine, how have you see yourself as a person of color in the ultimate community? How has that changed over the years for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Very broad question.
I want to give you room to go wherever you want with it.
Yeah. At first, I just wanted very much to be just kind of blend in, be a part of the team, not really stick my head out. Because as a person of color, especially living on the East Coast, person of color and being multiracial, I identify with 4 races: Black, Hawaiian, Japanese, and Native American. And all that mix makes very, very unique human. And also you're a sore thumb at all times. Mm-hmm. So I never got to as a kid to blend in or be a part of a group. So when I got into the team situations, I was I just just want to be a part of the team. And as more and more of the Black Lives Movement has gained strength, I found myself, people really seeking my, leadership in that context. And I really didn't see myself as that kind of leader, but as more and more of my followers and people around me have encouraged me to step into that space and really kind of just encourage me, you are doing big things in this community. I just leaned into me just being into my success as ultimate, and showing people, the POC community, that hey, you can be a POC and be widely successful in this sport, and it just doesn't have to be the only reason why you don't see more POCs is because that is not in our communities yet as much as other communities. So as that becomes more of a thing and we start introducing it more to our youth, you're going to see more and more POCs at the elite level.
Yeah, 100%. Representation matters, and you've been a terrific leader and continuing just to grow as a leader, as a person, as a representation in the community. So thank you so much for that. And finally, we're going to wrap this show up this is for both of you. I feel like it's whose line it is anyway. So this game is for both of you. It's coast to coast lightning round, because you've lived on the West Coast, you've lived on the East Coast. So we're going to compare and contrast some East Coast living, some West Coast living. Okay, you guys ready? And Elliot, you're going to go first on the answer, then Antoine after that. All right, ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Where is the better weather, on the West Coast or on the East Coast? And again, I want to remind people that Elliot's from South Carolina, has lived in New York, and also in San Francisco. I don't think I'm missing anywhere, right? I think that's.
Yeah. I was born in Boston, but otherwise you've touched them all.
Ah, well, now here comes the glory with the phone call for the recruitment, of course. And then Antoine, you've lived, as you've said, you lived in Hawaii. You said DC, Atlanta, and San Francisco, and Virginia Tech, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so the better weather, East Coast, West Coast.
Got to go West Coast.
Definitely West Coast.
I figured you go that way. All right, so better hospitality, and I guess again the asterisk I add that is that Elliot is from South Carolina, which the South does have a reputation of hospitality. But I guess we're the better vibes of the people.
Yeah, definitely the East Coast.
Elliot, you agreeing?
That's a tough one. Why do you say East Coast?
I think East Coast because people when I come to a household in the East Coast, like the first thing they offer is food, and I love food.
Nice.
I'm just a big boy, always trying to eat. So I think that's why I choose East.
Yeah. Yeah. I think averaging North and South East Coast, I'll come to East Coast as well.
Better hospitality. All right. Better driving experience, Elliot.
Better driving, probably in the West Coast. Before living in New York, would have said East Coast, but driving to practice like every week, there's just so much traffic. People are cutting you off. I feel like I've learned to be a New York driver in the last year. So better driving, I'll say West Coast.
I would say East Coast. Just because I live in San Francisco, because there's like so many choke points in San Francisco that like you can't avoid them. You have to go through them. So like if you go through one of those choke points, it's like an additional hour, even though it could have been a 10-minute drive.
Yeah, it is a shame. This is your first year of the Empire. It is going to be a welcome to New York. So I want to ask that question again to Antoine at the end of the season.
Antoine, if you like East Coast driving, you can drive into practice.
Okay.
All right. Antoine, you did mention food. So where's the better food, Antoine? East Coast or the West Coast?
West Coast. Definitely West Coast. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I was going to say East Coast.
Oh, yeah? I love Mexican food, and they definitely have the better Mexican food on the West Coast.
That's true. I was just in the Mission, San Francisco, like 2 weeks ago, and just went to like El Farolito every day pretty much. So
yeah. I used to live like three blocks away from there.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. Way better burritos out west. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, that's another welcome to New York in a good way, though. There is a lot of food in New York. You're going to have your options. So I feel that. Okay. So, this one's a bit tough, a bit leading, but better ultimate culture. So we're just going to pick up. We're just going to pick up at a random place in the East Coast or the West Coast, regardless of the city. So where do you expect you're going to have a better time? Elliot, you go first.
That's such a tough one. I'd have to say, and this is biased, I'd have to say West Coast only because that's where I was, my whole upbringing for Frisbee was. And if I were to go to, random high level pickup out there, I'd probably know half the people. And so, yeah, for me, it's just a level of like familiarity and how long I've known people. But I'm starting to learn the East Coast. So, ask me again in a few years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I would side with the edge would go to the West Coast just because I think the average Frisbee player in the West Coast is better because there's so many, like, there's just like very West Coast Frisbee. Almost everyone knows how to throw a Frisbee. But I will say in the East Coast, I do love physical battles and like kind of pushing and jostling people. And that's much more invited on the East Coast.
Yeah, I kind of actually almost agree that when I go to use East Coast Ultimate, you immediately show up and there's just that little edge. And you're like, well, I mean, why are they so ornery? They're cantankerous, just that disposition. Okay, so better outdoor activities, Antoine.
Oh, West Coast, just because of the weather. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm West Coast. I'm out west right now. I'm like, I've been just being outdoors every day for the last few months and loving it. But moving back to New York in a few weeks. So yeah, West Coast.
Counter argument. I think it could be enjoyable to walk around in sludge and mud on the Lower East Side. That's the counter argument. All right. And then finally, the better time zone. So do you like waking up when things are already starting, when your sports are over by 7 p.m. on the West Coast? Or do you like that you're part of the hustle and bustle by waking up at 7 a.m. on the East Coast? Elliot.
Better time zone. Wow. That's funny. I think, I might have to go West Coast. I feel like I'm having too many West Coast answers here for someone who lives on the East Coast, but I think I kind of like it. End of the night, like, everyone else is asleep on the East Coast and you get a few hours like late at night, West Coast, just to kind of like, be with less noise. And also I do like for work when I'm West Coast, waking up early and ending work early. So like on Mountain Time, I love starting the workday at 8, ending the workday at like, 4:30, rather than, New York, starting the workday at like 9 to 10 and ending, somewhere between like 6 and 8. So might have to go West Coast. And it's better for watching sports as well, because you never have to like go to bed if the game goes into overtime or something. So yeah, maybe West Coast.
I think I like your points that you made, but I would give the edge to the East Coast just because of the nature of my work. I have a good amount of clients in the West Coast, so if I can get up before them and do like the things I want to do and would like to do before they like start trying to blow up my phone, that's great. So they usually start contacting me within like 11 a.m. ish. So like if I can get up around like 7, 6 and like knock out like 4 or 5 hours worth of stuff before they start pinging me stuff, that's pretty good. But I will say, just for sports life, it is pretty great to wake up to like football already going on, basketball about to begin, and you're eating breakfast. That's pretty.
Yeah.
You can't beat that. Yeah.
Antoine, I think this highlights a big difference in us. If I have a meeting at 10 a.m., my alarm's at like 9:58. So yeah, maybe we won't be roommates for games, because you'll be waking up like an hour and a half before we go, and I'll be like rolling out of bed and just like eating an apple and then going to the field. So
Yeah, I love my morning routine. I keep that hour like pretty sacred to myself.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to keep it quiet. The competitive edge, just from the road trips where there are certain players where I go, hey, the van's leaving in 3 minutes. I'm not gonna tell which of your teammates those are, but yeah, there's 1 or 2 on the team. But it certainly is not Elliott and Antoine. I can tell the listeners that. So thanks so much. Again, this was signings number 5 and 6, and Antoine Davis and Elliott Chartock for the New York Empire this season. And the rest of the league is on notice. It's starting to come together. 6 is not a whole team make, but certainly 2 other talented players. So Antoine, for your first time on the podcast, again, welcome to New York Empire, and Elliott, thanks again for joining me for your second season with the team. And thanks to you, the listeners. This wraps up another edition of the New York Empire podcast, again, presented by the greatest ultimate bag. From the entire New York Empire family, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.